Colleagues, I would now have a motion to reconvene in open session. Made by Councillor Foxton, seconded by Councillor Erb. Please use e-scribe to cast your ballot. So good evening and welcome to our council meeting on June 19th, 2024. I will now ask Will Short, Regional Clerk, to do the roll call.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Craig.
Present.
Councillor Deutschmann. Present. Councillor Erb. Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Councillor Harris.
Present.
Councillor Hunick.
Present.
Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Liggett.
Present.
Councillor McCabe. Councillor Nowak. Councillor Solonen.
Present.
Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Ravanovic. Councillor Williams.
Present.
Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeg, and the Channotton peoples. In doing this, I want to reflect on what it means to be doing important community work like we are engaging in collectively today, and also my own individual relationship to the land. As a settler, one of the most important aspects of my individual journey towards truth and reconciliation has been to listen. And I continually am grateful to the community that continues to share their stories and concerns with me. As well as chair of the region, I know that I carry a large responsibility to ensure that it's not just myself on the individual level listening and acting, but that as a government, we are listening and creating action with community. I'm offering this acknowledgement as one of the many actions I personally, and the region largely, is taking in our journey towards reconciliation. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. I would also like to acknowledge the importance of October in celebrating German heritage, Canadian Islamic history, and Latin American history, as well as women's history. Okay, so we've had the motion to go into open moved and seconded by Councillors Foxton and Erb. Please use your e-scribe now that everybody's got their computer working. Councillor Salonen, have you cast your ballot?
Yep, I voted in favor.
Thank you. That is carried, colleagues. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, we have no presentations. We have no petitions. We do have delegations. There are 8 tonight. 3 have withdrawn. I would like to remind, so we have 8, 3 others have withdrawn. I would also like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. For those who are joining us in person, please proceed to the podium when you are called upon to speak. For those who are joining us electronically, please leave your video camera turned off and your microphone audio muted until you are called upon to speak. Delegations who are registered before the deadline have 5 minutes. Delegations who registered after the deadline have 3 minutes. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate removal from the meeting. Interrupting council members, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning on your camera at inappropriate times, or hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations, please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. And a quick reminder to members of the audience, you are asked to maintain order, and this means that you will not address the committee without permission of the chair, interrupt anyone, disrupt the meeting with unreasonable noise or vocal expressions such as applause, booing, or cheering, and any display of signs or posters. Our first delegation is Andrew Reeves, Kitchener, regarding these are the people who withdrew, so I will not bother reading them to you. Our first delegation is Delinda Reese from Waterloo. Delinda, welcome. You have the podium and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. I am Delinda Reese, a Waterloo resident, a retired U.S. medical doctor with training and clinical experience, years of practice in internal medicine, anesthesiology, and integrative medicine. I'm a conscientious dual citizen. I'm also a mother and grandmother with family who live in the Waterloo region. My whole life has been dedicated to health and well-being. I want you to understand this. Living water brings forth life. Poisoned water leaves death, disease, and destruction in its wake. Do you know what it's like to live with the consequences of poisoned water? I do. I never met my father-in-law. He died of poisoned water on Super Bowl Sunday in 1968. His death was a factor in my mother-in-law's death 5 years later. My husband lost both parents before he was an adult. I never knew my in-laws, and our children have been deprived of knowing their paternal grandparents. Those are some of the consequences when in 1966, the Allied Chemical Corporation, Hopewell, Virginia, began dumping its chemical wastes into the James River. Despite concerns, it was not until December of 1975 that the Allied Chemical plant was closed and fishing bans and advisories were ordered. The fishing industry was decimated, and the economic, medical, and environmental toll were significant. The Encyclopedia Virginia specifically notes, and I quote, "Local, state, and federal authorities overlooked safety regulations or made exceptions in large part because chemical production was Hopewell's biggest industry." Dark Waters is the 2019 movie in which Mark Ruffalo stars as Rob Billett, the lawyer who took on a decades-long legal suit against one of the most powerful corporations in the U.S. It tells the true story of the devastating effects of industrial chemical contamination of water, soil, and the aquifer in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Please know that to this day, those forever chemicals persist and continue to plague numerous communities along the Ohio River. Dark Waters portrays not only the health and environmental harms, but also depicts the very, very complicated social, political, and legal landscape in which an industry can co-opt and exploit a community in the name of economic growth and security. It also illustrates the great lengths to which such industrial giants can go and will go to hide the data, to squelch investigations, and the extent to which megacorporations can and will use legal and/or political means and loopholes in their attempts to evade any responsibility for actions. Whether it's the health and human harms caused by the decades-long poisoning of the water in Hinckley, California, as exposed by Aaron Brockovich, or whether it's the very convoluted century-and-a-half-long story of contaminated water, soil, and air of the Love Canal in Niagara, New York. The issues are the same and the harms are real. Moneyed interests extract their profits and leave the people to deal with the tragedies and the fallout. This goes on in Canada, too. Consider the water contamination and public health disaster in Walkerton, Ontario in May of 2000. Improper practices and systemic fraudulence were found to be among the factors leading to the Walkerton tragedy. And let's not forget our neighbor, Elmira. For whatever chemical, industrial, and economic gains were realized through the years, it's clear, going back at least as far as the 1960s, that residents noticed promise and that Elmira has suffered from the contamination of its aquifer by deadly chemicals. It wasn't until 1989...
Delinda, you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. It wasn't until 1989 that the people in Elmira officially learned that they couldn't drink the water or even eat the vegetables in their gardens. All these years later, expensive cleanup Efforts continue, and Elmira depends on water from the Waterloo region. The James River, Virginia, Dark Waters in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and the Ohio River Valley, Hinckley, California, the Love Canal in Niagara, New York, Walkerton, Ontario, Elmira, Ontario. What do these have in common? In each case, private interests, often supported by government, extracted their profits at the cost of public well-being. As a Waterloo resident and as a Canadian citizen, it's my obligation to ask, with respect to the decision-making about the Wilmot Land Assembly, and especially as concerns our water, how will you be transparent? How will you be accountable? And how will you protect public well-being? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delinda, for taking the time. Please, no applause. Jazz of hands is great. Thank you very much. I see no questions. The next delegation is Ian McLean, Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Ian. You have the floor, and you have 5 minutes.
Well, thank you and good evening. I'm here representing myself and the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce and my colleague Greg DeRocher in the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. Together, we represent over 3,000 businesses in the community. And also together, we have been vocal advocates for nearly 14 years about the importance of having a large site that can attract anchor employment here in Waterloo Region. The need for and call for this land assembly is nothing new, and it's not someone else's plan. It is and was started here in Waterloo Region. Losing Schneider's in 2011 was the wake-up call. Let me start by saying we've been very clear at both chambers of commerce and in the community that it is critical and essential that the landowners involved here be dealt with fairly. I'll leave that but it's important that that be a core principle. But there's also a broad business community understanding that this land assembly in Wilmot Township, even including Waterloo Economic Development Corporation, two chambers, Communitech, the New Hamburg Board of Trade, the Toronto Region Board of Trade, business leaders in London and Windsor, essentially the broader business community across southwestern Ontario realizes how important this work is for our future growth and prosperity. Neither of Toyota's previous sites in Cambridge in the mid-1990s and Woodstock in the 1980s and then Woodstock in 1990s were part of an official plan or industrial planning process, and there wasn't public consultation until the sites were assembled and a project announced. The land has to be assembled first. That's been the state of play for over 50 years. Fast forward to this last year, St. Thomas VW plant and the province worked with the local municipality to get 700 acres in addition to the 800 that was already there to assemble a full 1,500 acre mega site for VW, a company that doesn't even assemble cars here in Waterloo Region or in Canada. The new Honda plants announced earlier this year also included agricultural lands that were acquired before official Honda expansion announcement or rezoning process. Honda is currently investing $15 billion in 4 sites in Ontario. Both the future expansion and retaining jobs are the critical nature of assembling lands for these anchor employers. If we fail to assemble a suitable site here, I and others are absolutely convinced that our most important manufacturing employer is at serious future risk with potentially devastating impact for our community. There are 7,000 direct jobs that average somewhere between $90,000 and $100,000 in income, not to mention the local supply chain impact of at least another 28,000 indirect jobs. I'm talking about Toyota in Cambridge. These workers live in all parts of our region. They live in Kitchener and the townships. They live all over. We will collectively own this failure if those jobs start to disappear. If there's no job or no project right on the table right now, then what's the concern about Toyota? What we know is Toyota Motor Corp is already well advanced in putting $14 billion into a 1,000-acre EV battery plant in North Carolina that will be in production in less than 2 years. If Toyota chooses to put a second EV battery plant in the U.S., as opposed to in Canada, because we don't have a suitable site near the Toyota assembly plant, that will put all of the Canadian operations at a permanent logistical and competitive disadvantage. This matters to the region, the province, and the country. The benefit we gain is potentially billions in new investments, thousands in new local jobs, and ancillary benefits that come from it. This is the benefit for not only Wilmot and the regional
Ian, you have
residents,
1
but
minute
also
remaining.
for Ontario and Canada. We need to finish the job of assembling the land to help ensure the above scenario never happens. We haven't had a large site for 11 years. We lost the Schneider's jobs because we didn't. The provincial plan and our community's expectation of growing to almost 1 million people in 20 to 30 years demands that we have a concrete job or plan for new jobs and economic development in our region. We can do both. We can protect and be sustainable and protect our lands and still make the investments that are absolutely essential to ensuring we have the jobs and the economic future for future generations. So let's finish the important, critical work of assembling these lands and move on to the equally important job of deciding how to best utilize the land assembled for the benefit of this and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Don't go anywhere. Councillor Deutschman, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair Redmond. 2 questions. First question, Mr. McLean, you talk about the Schneiders, and just to clarify, I was here in 2011 at this horseshoe when the Schneiders matter was happening, and Schneiders left for a whole bunch of reasons aside from us not having land, because at the time Canada Bread was already in Hamilton, and that's why they were making the move that way. So I can tell you, I was in closed committee meetings with Mayor Zaire and other parties, and we understood what was happening with respect to that and had nothing to do with whether we had land available or not. Now, you reference the threat to Toyota. Do you have direct knowledge, or is it speculation on your part with respect to Toyota?
First of all, in 2011, what we do know is that there were 3 competing municipalities trying to come up with land so that we could have a consolidated Schneider's or Maple Leafs plant. So I'll leave that aside. As far as direct knowledge, no, I don't. But what we do know is that what is happening is that motor assembly plants are being planned and accommodated where there are battery plants. That's a global phenomenon. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out.
So speculation then. So the second question,
Speculation. It's informed. It's informed.
Thank you.
It's informed
Thank you.
information.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. So the second question I have, I appreciate that you raise that you want the landowners to be dealt with fairly. And I just have to ask you, in April of this year, you were interviewed. And in an interview with The Record, you called land assembly opposition a knee-jerk reaction by NIMBYs who don't get it. And then you said the histrionics, oh my God, New Hamburg is going to grow. It is growing whether this gets done or not because we're going to have 1 million people. So, Mr. McLean, I just want to give you an opportunity. Do you want to clarify your remarks and perhaps extend some apologies with respect to those remarks?
No, what I was referring to was the notion that there wasn't a negotiation going on, and that it was either or. There was no context to the discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Salonen, go ahead.
Thank you. Nice to see you as always, Ian. I just had a point of clarification when you had mentioned the different chambers and EDCs. I know that you had noted New Hamburg Board of Trade. I just wanted to make sure, because my understanding is they've not made a formal, as a Board of Trade statement on this matter. I just wanted to get clarity on your comment regarding them.
If I misspoke, I apologize. Members of the New Hamburg Board of Trade have had numerous conversations.
Okay, absolutely perfect. Thank you for the clarification.
I have no other questions. Thank you very much, Ian. The next delegation is Ashwin Anamalai and Shiva Subramanya, and I'm sorry if I've butchered that second name. Please introduce yourselves. Welcome, and you have the floor, and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Council. My name is Shiva Subramanian, and this is Ashwin. We want Waterloo region to be number 1, but not for the wrong reasons. We are number 1 in terms of the reported hate crimes across the country. We can say that we are number 1 because we have better data collection, but I think our lived experiences in the past year kind of adds to the data that we are seeing. Since the beginning of the year, there has been a significant increase in the racism faced by people of the South Asian origin. It started with the small things. You know, people don't smile back when you're walking on the street, or they don't greet when I say good morning or hello. But then it's turned quite aggressive. Now people show us the finger when we're walking on the street, or they ask us to explicitly go back.
This was supposed to be her part, but she's not able to complete, so I'm going to take over. We thought it was bad until someone shared that they were spit at and liquids had been thrown at them, and someone was even asked to go back to India in front of their little kids. One morning, about a month and a half ago, it all culminated when Shiva and I were verbally berated and pushed in downtown Kitchener on a public sidewalk just because someone did not like the way we looked and the color of our skin. There were 30+ bystanders standing there. Nobody intervened. They could clearly see who was being physically and verbally abusive and who was at the receiving end. Throughout this downward spiral, we spoke with our friends. We spoke to elected officials at all levels of government. We spoke to city councillors, regional councillors, MPs, MPPs, trusting democracy. We got words of comfort. We got no action whatsoever. We spoke about this at committees where decision makers like municipal staff, councillors, the GRT, the police, and post-secondary institutions were present. None of it changed. Even then, without losing hope, I went to the Waterloo Regional Record. They carried a front-page story on the racism faced by international students in our community a month ago. Nothing changed. It is so ironic that even journalists in our community, who are considered the fourth pillar of democracy, are being harassed because of their names and not because of the stories that they publish. By now, you've all seen that video where I'm being asked to go back to India. That was because of the color of my skin, the way I look, and the way I speak. Many of you wonder why I went about recording this incident. Before I recorded, I engaged in good faith dialogue for 5 minutes with the person. The person who was harassing me did not want any of it, and all I got in return was racial rhetoric. She constantly asked me to go back, and that is when I started recording, and now you know the rest. I'm not going to talk about the negative humanitarian consequences of racism in the region, as our biggest focus is on money, right? Money speaks. If we continue to let our region spiral into more racism, the best and the brightest in the world are not going to come here to study. We lose out on attracting talent. Even people who wish to attend diploma mills would choose to go to other cities that are safer than ours. So we will lose our competitive advantage. When people avoid coming to Waterloo region, our home prices would collapse, our entire regional economy would collapse and start to resemble the Rust Belt. Is this the Waterloo region you want to build? These targeted racist incidents aren't happening in a faraway land. They are happening in Kitchener, Cambridge, and in Waterloo. It is regional council's responsibility to tackle the issues of racism and hate in the community. This is 100% a local issue. And setting council's responsibility aside for a moment, I share a close personal relationship with many of you around the horseshoe. We discuss various topics, we run into each other, we meet each other regularly. I'm your friend, I'm your neighbor, I'm your constituent. You do provide me with words of comfort, but what I need is action, actual action. By concrete action, I want to see the region run a regional anti-racism campaign with all municipalities coming together. And let's discuss the blue whale in the room, Conestoga College. From 700 students to 31,000 students, phenomenal
Ashwin,
growth.
you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Now, in a majority of cases, it is Conestoga's own students that are at the end of receiving racism, at the receiving end of racism in our region. They have a $250 million surplus. They, in good faith as a community college, should step up for the people in the community and their own students themselves. I see multiple regional councillors regularly meeting with Conestoga's leadership. Some of you are friends with the leadership. Why don't you use this relationship to do what's right for the community? And to those who want me to pack my bags and leave, I'd like to tell you a Tamil saying. It goes like, Yadum ure yavarum kelir. It means the entire world is one family. I'm very proud of my Tamil ethnicity. I'm proud of my Canadian nationality. Waterloo region is home. This is my home. We have a problem. We will come together as one united community and we will spread the message of love. Thank you.
So Ashwin and Shiva, I just want to thank you so very much for coming to raise this really important issue. And I have a few questions, but I know this is deeply personal and in heart, so thank you very much for taking the time. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I am so sorry. And you know what? Everyone in this room was an immigrant. I think we forget that. I think that we forget it's a privilege to be here. I have a baseball picture of my father from the 1920s. and he is the only dark-skinned individual in that picture. And my older brother said he broke a barrier there. So Ashton, don't let this make you bitter, because if it makes you bitter, we've lost that. But I want you to look around these people here, and a lot of them are nodding with me. They're not your enemies. But we all have to stand up for this in a gentle way. We have to be respectful and accept one another. And that's the way to do it. No government can legislate respect. No government can legislate decency. It has to come from us, each and every one of us. I'm a mayor of a township where some of these problems are happening. I sit with my council and try and figure out how we're going to make it different. But we're going to try. And it all starts with each and every one of us individuals. I am so sorry this happened to you.
Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Ashwin and Shiva, thank you for being as brave as you were and are. As you know, this hit me hard as well. I do have a question, but I also feel very compelled to speak because this doesn't impact you. This impacts every single one of us. And, you know, I saw that video, and while I couldn't show my daughter everything, at a 7-year-old, I had to sit down and tell her that don't let anyone tell you you don't belong here. And as someone who is from this community, I never thought that this would be the point that we're at today. I want to just ask you about that community education piece, because I know 4 years ago we had a town hall, given the circumstances we were in. There has been some work with upstream funding, capacity building funding. I think that is part of a way to reconcile in some ways. But in terms of that action and education, you know, what would that look like, in your opinion?
The region has a primary responsibility in solving this. It's not the sole body that can solve this, but it's a very huge, important partner in helping solve racism in the community. And the way it would look like, in my view, is that the region has so many bus stops, GRT buses, and trains. So we could start with an advertising campaign there. We could run more advertising on radio, on television, on billboards, because this is an awareness campaign, and it's also bringing grassroots organizations together and addressing it on a community level. But since there is so much hate and racism, like, we are #1 in Canada. So this region has to take ownership and take action instead of just mere words.
Okay. So, Chair Redmond, through you, I want to take this moment to, and I know our community safety wellbeing plan is working. I want to see something come back to us with kind of that education component back to this council, and coupled with communication and talks with the area municipalities. Some of us received a very, very hateful email a few days ago, and that is just one of many. And we have a significant crisis when it comes to racism and discrimination in this region. It should never be this way, as Councillor Foxton said. We are all, except for Indigenous people, settlers to this country and this community. We have to do better, and Ashwin and Shiva, you should never have to experience that. Nobody in this community should have to experience that at all. And you know that I stand with you in this fight. I don't know if we'll ever end racism, but we have to do better. Thank you.
So thank you, Councillor James. So staff will take that under advisement and come back, not only with the plan, but with the action items, which I think is really what you're asking for. And Ashwin and Shiva, we will make sure that you get a copy of that report when it comes back. And I know Acting Commissioner Spooner is sitting here, and I wrote down your suggestions for the GRT and the ION, so we'll take that under advisement as well too. Councillor Hunick.
Ashwin and Shiva, thank you so much for so vulnerably sharing your experience, your horrible experience that is absolutely reprehensible. Our community is better because you are a part of it. My life is better because you are a part of it. And I hear you asking for more than words and action. And I appreciate that Councillor James is going to bring that forward for us soon. I want to acknowledge that I'm white and that there's privilege that comes with that. And so if you have anything further to recommend in terms of action steps, because we want to stand with you, or in my case, sit with you.
Thanks for that, Chantal. So this was not the first incident that we had to face in this community. Like, this council is, we are not strangers to this council. We are pretty vocal in the community. It took us so long, so many incidents, one after the other, listening to stories from our friends. All my friends are here, one after the other. And at some point, we just could not take it, and somebody had to build the cat. And so we are in this situation right now.
Just so you know, it doesn't fall on deaf ears. And yeah, we stand with you, we sit with you. We're going to work together to do what we can to make this better.
Thank you. Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. Ashwin, second. Sorry, just one sec. Yes, Ashwin and Shiva, thank you very much for coming today to express yourself on this point. I'm very glad that you shared that video. That was very brave of you to do that, because now, it exposes you to a lot of attention, and some of it not good attention. And I can see, Shiva, with you, how much this means to you, and how hurt you are by all of this. I just want to point out a few things. One, the region has been proactive in a sense on some things. So for example, we passed a code of use bylaw, which allows bylaw to deal with discriminatory actions in the community, which is unique. So that's one thing that we've done. And also to council as a whole, passed a resolution. I believe Mayor Foxton brought that resolution denouncing racism in our community. So we're certainly there, and I just wanted to ask, just to let you know that we are going to do more. We're not just speaking the words, we're going to have action to the words, and we've already taken some of those steps, like a code of use bylaw, okay? And that is not an easy thing to pass in a community. There's very few communities that have that type of bylaw in place, so we're unique with respect to that. On the issue of police-reported hate, I hear what you're saying. We're number one in that category, but I just want to point out that from my perspective, that's police-reported hate, okay? It's not incidents of hate. So what that means is that people feel comfortable, and this is a positive, that people feel comfortable to report to the police incidents of hate that happen in the community. And that we have to continue to keep doing if we're going to address this issue. So that is the point with respect to that. But as you heard from Councillor James, and Councillor Williams was just telling me too, that committee will be looking to bring forward a campaign to express that racism has no place in Waterloo Region. So thank you again for coming out.
Thank you. Councillor Leggett.
Thank you. My internet's unstable, so I might cut out, and I apologize. I was actually quite horrified when I saw your video late this afternoon. I had the opportunity to watch it. Please don't, so I'm a mayor of Cambridge as well as being a regional councillor, so please do not assume that we do not talk to Conestoga about this. Some of us do. We talk about the racism buildup in our communities and the fears that we have. So we're not all friendly and warm and fuzzy. If you see us having conversations, we could be having a different conversation than what you're maybe thinking that we're doing. And please don't put us all in the same bag as well. Please take the smiles and the good mornings and everything else from people to.
I think we've lost Councillor Leggett. I think she's frozen. Are you back, Jan?
Am I there?
Now you are.
Okay, thank you. I think the good mornings and the smiles that you do get for people are what you should be taking in and absorbing. That would be much healthier for you. I know it's difficult. I'll tell you a little story. My husband, when he came as a refugee, when he started school, could not speak English. He was ridiculed. He dressed funny. He looked funny. He was obviously not from this country by the way he was. He had stones thrown at him as a child going to school. But interesting, the kids that were throwing the stones had Scottish accents. So they weren't from here either, but yet they continually told him to go back to where he came from. Racism comes in all colors and to all people. It's going to come over and over in waves as the immigrants come to this country or to North America. I can't apologize enough for those that are abusive to you, but hopefully, this wave I hope you have the strength to get through this, because you are very welcome in this region. You are very welcome in the city of Cambridge as well.
Thank you, Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to mention about the Code of Use bylaw, which Councillor Deutschmann had mentioned. Thank you. Thanks for coming in. You've made yourself vulnerable in front of us and the community. And we feel the pain, I think, that you're feeling in your heart, not with the same degree, but I think we share that pain. And we're very disappointed that you have experienced this, but we hear of this, but to hear it firsthand from people like you who are prepared to risk their vulnerability and share it with us is so important. So as difficult as that may, please continue to keep doing that, to keep advocating. It has to be a partnership between everybody that's here, the people around this horseshoe, and the victims. And we commit ourselves, we hear you, and we commit ourselves to being part of the journey that you're on.
Can I respond to that quickly, Madam Chair? Yeah, thank you so much for that, Councillor Erb. Making ourselves vulnerable has been extremely hard. We just reported one incident out of the 10s that we personally have undergone. And so many of our friends have multiple stories. All of them don't come out. You're barely seeing the tip of the iceberg. We see more than what you see.
I think we know that, and that's the sad part for us, that there's so much more out there, and it's a big ship to turn around.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to echo and build upon the very eloquent comments of my council colleagues, and also just thank you for your bravery for coming in tonight and for meeting with me last week on the weekend to talk about this, and to coming into Waterloo Council as well. And I guess I would just also say that in addition to what you have shared, both of you have shared, and understanding that it really is just the tip of the iceberg. And then in addition to what council colleagues have shared, I would just say that, this really addressing this at the root causes is why we now have invested in things like our READY teams, reconciliation, equity, action, diversity inclusion teams at the region. And there's a tremendous amount of work happening there. And I know that's happening at local municipalities as well. But I think it also, so there's that work that happens. It will take time, as Councillor Erb said, about turning this ship around. But it also really requires a collective community response. And by that, I mean, when good people like us around the horseshoe and others who are listening and people who are generally, very decent people, it requires us to say something and to speak up when we do see things like that happening in our community, acts of racism, acts of violence, etc. It behooves us to step up and say, hey, that's not right. What are you doing? We have to be active bystanders. We can't just let people like yourselves bear this burden continually. So thank you for coming in, and thank you, Councillor James, for asking. I was going to ask about the community safety and well-being plan, so thanks for raising that, because I do look forward to seeing when that information comes forward.
Councillor Ravanovich.
Thank you very much, Chair Redmond and Ashwin and Shiva. I too want to thank you for coming in this evening and having the courage to share your lived experience with us, and to those who came with you to support you this evening. I know this is extremely difficult. not just for the people here in the room, but others, as you say, in the community who experience this. And the reality is there is no place for this kind of racism, whether it's in the communities that make up Waterloo region, whether it's elsewhere in Ontario, elsewhere in Canada, or quite frankly, anywhere on our planet. Unfortunately, we're seeing rises of this in many places, and I think it just reminds us all of how much we have to double down to fight back against it, to push back against it, and to work and remind everyone about the reality that fundamentally we are all one. And that's what we need to remember. I came as a young child to this country as well, and I can tell you, with a name like Berislav Verbanovic, it wasn't always the most popular thing back in the late '60s, early '70s. And unfortunately, what we're seeing today is that much, worse and challenging. And so, thank you so much. And I know this council, our council in Kitchener, and everyone throughout the region is committed to continuing our work on this.
Thank you. Councillor James, you want to,
Just
another
one more
question?
question through you, Chair. Ashwin and Shiva, how safe do you feel in our community right now?
We've considered purchasing body cams, Councillor James.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. You can take your seats, and again, thank you for your intervention, and we'll make sure that you get a copy of that report when it comes back to council. Greg Mikolenko, Grand River Environmental Network. Greg, are you here? We won't ask you to jump the wall. Welcome. You have the podium, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I have a background in ecology. I taught environmental studies at the University of Waterloo. I've been active in environmental and ecological matters. I'd like to respond to Mr. McLean. About a month ago, there was a proposal by the big pork plant to chop down a pristine forest of 30 acres for an expansion. I came to speak about how that was an inadequate thing, and indeed. Mr. McLean was there, and he posed a false dichotomy. It was either jobs, 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 dozens, hundreds of jobs, or these poor trees. And so I suggested at the licensing meeting, postpone a decision for about 3 weeks. We've got information now, let's talk it over. And indeed, the company withdrew that application to cut down the trees. And we responded by sending the president a note of appreciation for having been generous enough to come to a decision another way. Now Mr. McLean is doing the same thing. It's jobs, 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 batteries, car plants, and these guys are in the way. They're not. There are lots of alternatives to that particular agricultural site. Now, I would like to speak to the matter of the non-disclosure agreement by giving a few case studies. At the University of Waterloo, I was approached by a graduate student who'd made some really impressive discoveries in a branch of engineering, and he found his professor had taken his discoveries and sold them to a private interest. Would I be his advocate? We found nothing in the university, no committees or things that could handle the question. Finally, the student went to the Board of Governors. He had a 200-page dossier of comparative studies. They gave him 20 minutes. There was not a single question from the members of the Board of Governors. He went away in despair, but somebody came running after him. It was the president of Bell Canada, and his message to him was, your case was perfectly just, correct. Awful things have happened to you, but one thing you have to learn is in a big institution, you don't rock the boat. The student then had to get a loan, launch a lawsuit. The university and the professor could see that they were going to lose it, and they capitulated. But they insisted on a non-disclosure agreement. The student said, I don't care about disclosing the amount of money, but I reserve the right to disclose the fact that there was theft, that the institution was inadequate in its response, and that you want to cover up your sins. Second one, a friend who worked for one of the municipalities in the summer was a whistleblower because a manager was making inappropriate sexual advances towards one of the employees. So they fired him. He went to the Human Rights Commission of Ontario, won his case, and they were to restore his salary and a fine as well. And the municipality wanted a non-disclosure agreement to hide their sins. There was an inquiry, a public inquiry into regional government, and this is very pertinent for this body. Ken Sealing was the chair. I attended to hear some of the presentations. There are actually people who made them in here tonight. And a report was made, but Sealing was forced to accede to a non-disclosure agreement, and that document, which could have great implications for the efficient and running of regional government, we've never been able to see it. Now we come...
Greg, you have 1 minute remaining.
What's that? Okay.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Okay, and now we come to the case here. I would like to read to you the cautionary advice that's given by legal authorities in Britain about the abuse of non-disclosure agreements. Your duty to act in the best interest of your client does not override your professional obligations to uphold the proper administration of justice in a way that maintains the public trust and confidence, and to act with independence and integrity. You have completely lost the public trust. I've never seen such a thing happen. People are in despair, they feel betrayed, they feel badly wronged, and I think you must stop trying to acquire that piece of land. Go back. It's so severely damaged here. It really
Greg, thank you so much for coming in. I see no questions. The next delegation is Ramzi Abdi. And Ramzi, are you here on behalf of Crania Schools, or?
I am not.
Okay.
I'm just a resident of Waterloo Region. And
super.
happy
You're
to be here.
welcome, and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm here to talk about an issue that not only affects individuals, but the entire fabric of our community. The increase in hate crimes in our community. Whether subtle or overt, the reality is that these have profound impacts on our community and our reputation. 2 years ago, Waterloo Region ranked 5th in Canada, and last year we moved up to 1st with the highest rate of reported hate crimes per capita in the entire country. We also know that the reported incidents are only the tip of the iceberg, as the majority go unreported. Canada was the first country in the world to embrace multiculturalism as a national policy back in 1971. Canada included preserving and expanding multiculturalism in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms under Section 27 back in 1982. And then we passed the Multiculturalism Act in 1988. Multiculturalism is part of the fabric of our national identity, embraced as one of our values and enshrined in our laws. This isn't about changing times. This is our history, a history many are proud of. Proud that we are a country that embraces and values our diversity. All of Canada, and indeed Waterloo Region, have seen waves of immigration. Many of these different groups experienced significant resistance over time, and yes, even hate when they came. As you all know, at one point, local residents and politicians decided to change the name of Berlin to Kitchener to distance our community from our German cultural heritage. For decades, our region has seen resistance to changing demographics and racism towards a number of different groups. The difference between the demographics at UW and Laurier led to a derogatory nickname, casually dismissed by many, but a reminder of not being fully welcomed for many East Asian students and residents. In recent years, Waterloo Region has seen a boom in growth. We're one of the fastest growing parts of the province. Regardless of whether they're relocating to join us from the GTA or from farther away, they're coming here for a reason. And that is because Waterloo Region has so much to offer. One thing that helps our region stand out is our post-secondary education institutions. Here in Ontario, we've seen underfunding in education, which has included underfunding colleges and universities. As a result, many institutions were forced to increase the number of international students to help make up for funding shortfalls. Conestoga College was one of the worst offenders in the country and led to calls for reform because of their exploitation for profits. But it is not the government funding cuts or college administration feeling the majority of the backlash. It is the international students themselves. It's okay to blame somebody coming to Waterloo to seek a better education and a better future? I don't think so. However, as many residents struggle with affordability, many different racialized groups have seen an increase in racism and hate. Not just international students, but many among our South Asian and Muslim communities, as they are part of an increasing demographic, and as many may be identifiable by the color of their skin, accent, or religious or cultural clothing. In these challenging times, we need to remember Canada's multicultural promise. It's not enough to celebrate diversity in words. We must act on it every day. Whether by speaking out against prejudice, supporting local initiatives that promote inclusion, or standing in solidarity with those affected by hate. Every action matters. While we may never eliminate racism, we can address it and its impacts. I'm here to appeal to you to do more. It was nice to see some of you embracing our region's diversity over the last couple of weeks as you went to events and parades and sang songs in German during Oktoberfest. I'm happy to see many of you out
Ramsey,
at the
you have 1
KW
minute
Multicultural
remaining.
Festival. But a couple days a year is not enough. We're an amazing region that embraces some of our diversity, but we need to ensure we embrace multiculturalism and inclusion for all. We've heard others mention ideas, and I implore you to support these initiatives. Action is needed so that Waterloo Region helps decrease the national hate crime average, not increase it. I love Waterloo, and I believe we can reduce the hate experienced by many groups. I'm here because I will not be silent. I will stand against the racism faced by Black residents, Brown residents, East Asian residents, Indigenous residents. I stand against the anti-Semitism and Islamophobia faced by our Jewish and Muslim communities. Personally, I face a number of assumptions about my views, hate, silencing, and erasure due to my Palestinian background. But here I am. I'm proud to stand against all forms of hate, racism, and oppression. And I hope that you will stand with those of us who want a better future for all residents of Waterloo Region, for our kids, and their futures. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. Councillor Deutschman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Evan. Just quickly, I just want to say thank you very much for coming out this evening and expressing your views so eloquently. We appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next delegation is Eddie Grignon from Kitchener. Eddie, are you here? Okay, I'll go on to the next delegation, Martin Levesque, All Saints Anglican Church. Welcome, Martin. You have 5 minutes and the podium is yours.
Thank you. My name is Pastor Marty Levesque, and I represent 250 families at All Saints Anglican Church in the Sidewalk Community Center. Recently, as we've heard tonight, Ashwin Anamale recorded a video where he was confronted by a woman after she had given him the middle finger in an unprovoked gesture. In the video, you can hear the woman saying, too many people from India have come to Canada and they need to go home. We were blessed to welcome Ashwin to church on Sunday so he could tell his story to us and not just have it be something that comes to government. Unfortunately, there's no single definitive source for the exact number of reported racist incidents that exist in Waterloo. Many incidents of racism go unreported due to fear, lack of trust in authorities, or cultural barriers. The data that is collected is dispersed. There's data that's collected by police departments, human rights organizations, and community groups, making it challenging to know how bad the problem really is. However, there have been many reports and discussions highlighting instances of racism in Waterloo. The Waterloo Regional Police Services have reported increased hate crimes, including those targeting racial minorities. Local media outlets and community groups have documented experiences of racism, such as discrimination in housing, employment, and just in public spaces, as reported by Ashwin. It's essential to remember that these reports are just a snapshot, just the tip of the iceberg. The true extent of racism in the region is likely more significant and much more pervasive than we know. And it's a regular occurrence that we encounter at my church at our food bank. I'm here tonight to ask Council to put together a plan for the collection of a robust amount of data so we know how the extent of the problem, so we know how bad it is, and to continue to develop and iterate upon your plans to combat racism in our community. There probably is a robust plan in place. I just feel that it needs to be constantly updated as a living document as new things come to light. Tackling this problem, though, is not just a concern for government. It's a concern for all of civil society. I do not expect Regional Council to solve the problem of racism alone. Regional Council will need to work closely with municipal governments, the Waterloo Police Services, but also other institutions in civil society, including churches, in the development and upgrading of a plan to combat racism. As such, please know, my community stands ready to respond in any way we can, to participate at any roundtable, and to live out our baptismal vows to respect the dignity of every human being. We are ready to serve, we are ready to aid in whatever we can to ensure that the region of Waterloo continues to be a leading, progressive, and sustainable community. At All Saints, we commit to a vision where all are saints, all are welcomed, and all are loved. In that spirit, we want to help. We want to help and are ready to help in whatever way your staff feels is appropriate. We will commit to praying to an end to the evil of racism and for the healing of all those that have been touched by this sin, but we know that that is not enough. But we can do more, we want to do more, and we must do more. We are here and ready to serve and ready to help. Thank you for your time.
Marty, thank you for coming in, and I'll make the same undertaking I did to a previous delegation. And when that report comes back through community safety and well-being about all the action initiatives around racism, we'll make sure that you get a copy.
Thank you.
Councillor Hunick.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Pastor Levesque, for coming and for acknowledging the thoughts of many marginalized and racialized people, that racism is pervasive, also including housing and employment and law. Chair Redmond, I wonder if, as part of the report coming back, can we also get data on what WRPS is doing or has done to build solidarity with racial minorities and to combat racism that they encounter?
Absolutely, although WRPS is an integral part of the community safety and well-being, so we can certainly get that data.
Excellent, thanks.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Pastor Marty, for coming in and speaking so eloquently tonight about the scourge of racism, and thank you for opening your church for Shiva and Ashwin. That's a really great way to share that story. Innovative and open, as you always are. Part of what I was just wondering is, I'm not sure if this is a question for the pastor or for you, Chair Redmond, or someone on staff. Are churches and groups like that, like the membership of the community safety and well-being table, are church groups like Pastor Marty was just referencing, able to participate in those discussions? How would an offer like Pastor Marty's be managed by the region?
So we try to separate questions of staff from delegations, but Pastor Marty, if you don't mind, I would look to Connie McDonald, who's intimately involved in this initiative, to speak to that question.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'd love to get your contact information so that we can connect. We work with a number of different faith-based groups and are always looking for more to join.
Councillor McCabe?
Thank you. Sorry, I just had a bit of trouble getting off the mic. Thank you very much. And just another quick follow-up, and I guess it is for Connie, because there's a conference coming in November. Is that something that sort of the general public is able to attend, or is that in people able to participate in that, or is it just people who are currently members of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Table?
Connie?
Thank you, and through the chair. So that conference is for people who are involved in the Children and Youth Planning Table, the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan, and the Immigration Partnership, as well as a number of community members. We haven't done an open call because we're tight on space, but part of the discussion there will be how do we do further community engagement and have more community dialogue on issues like combating hate that are a core part of the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan. So I'd say stay tuned because there will be more opportunities to come.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Pastor Levesque, just another report that you may be interested in picking up and reading when it's available. But thank you again for coming, and thank you for your outreach to Shiva and Ashwin, and for the continued work that you do in our community to support people of all socioeconomic types and backgrounds. So thank you very much.
Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Pastor, for coming in today and clearly demonstrating your allyship and not making it about you, but about those who are impacted and face this on a daily basis, and providing a space for a safer space for individuals in the community. And I'm just going to take a minute to thank all of those who are there in support of this as well. Being an ally takes courage and risk, and often vulnerability, and putting yourself as an unintended target to some of what we have to experience every single day. Thank you.
So Marty, now you do get to sit down. Thank you so much. And the next and last delegation is Kevin Thomason, Grand River Environmental Network. Welcome, Kevin. You have the podium and you have 5 minutes.
Honorable mayors, councillors, and guests, my name is Kevin Thomason, a Wilmot resident and a member of the Fight for Farmland group, determined to find better outcomes for this disaster of a land assembly for a mega industrial site and a company development in Wilmot Township that's contrary to all previous planning. We've heard a lot recently about a supposed shortage of industrial lands in Waterloo region. However, this simply is not true. We have thousands of acres of industrial lands sitting vacant in Waterloo region. In Wilmot Township, there is yet to be a single lot or parcel sold in the Wilmot Industrial Park that has sat empty now for 23 years. Generation Industrial Park behind Costco in Waterloo has sat for over a decade, with streets, curbs, lights, and sidewalks to empty fields without a single lot sold either. The region's own employment strategy technical brief states Waterloo region has consistently had a higher industrial vacancy rate, 4 times higher than most of the GTA municipalities for years, with 2,592 acres of vacant employment land. And this was before the regional official plan opened up over 1,000 acres of additional lands for 170,000 new jobs over the next 30 years. Yet we repeatedly hear about Schneider's Meats and Dr. Oetker not locating here, despite the fact they each needed less than 50 acres. This proposed Wilmot land assembly is more than 15 times larger than that. Few can grasp the sheer size, magnitude, and lack of proper planning for what's being proposed on the far west side of Wilmot, more than a 50-kilometer round trip from our urban centers of Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge. Our regional official plan had sustainable, complete communities, a focus on housing choice and affordability, active transportation, environmental protection, and there is to be almost no farmland loss over the next 30 years, with thousands of pages of studies and expert reports confirming this visionary plan. Instead, this is all overridden for this unplanned Wilmot Land Assembly with incomplete studies and forced provincial expansions with no data whatsoever. Agriculture and food processing is our #1 industry in Waterloo Region, generating more revenues and providing more jobs than any other industry. Our farms are amongst the most successful and profitable in all of Canada. We shouldn't be destroying our #1 industry and compromising farms for kilometers in every direction. The province has recently forced 6,400 acres of unsustainable and unaffordable urban sprawl across Waterloo Region, destroying our regional official plan. Then Wilmot Township was targeted with hundreds of additional acres of farmland destruction under Bill 162, destroying our progressive countryside line. Now, this mega industrial site dooms another 770 acres in Wilmot. We've gone from just 46 hectares being sufficient to meet all considerable growth until 2051 in Wilmot to now thousands of acres of Wilmot farmland being destroyed. Never before has this new city of 50 to 100,000 people ever been built contrary to all previous planning and without even a single public meeting or study. Why all the secrecy? Why this unprecedented NDA that has bound all elected officials and staff for 8 months and betrayed integrity, public trust, and confidence? Why hasn't there been a single public meeting or any studies released, despite thousands of outraged citizens expressing serious concerns? Why has all 22 of our Freedom of Information requests asking the basic common sense questions about roads, water, sewage, and costs been denied? No one's against growth or economic development, but this site meets just 7 of 44 Ontario job site selection criteria, compared to other potential sites in Waterloo Region meeting 36 to 40 of 44 criteria. There's almost none of the needed infrastructure at this distant remote site. There's a single hydro line, a single highway, and a single rail line already facing capacity issues for GO trains. The site is not flat, as claimed. There's more than 6 stories of elevation change. The site is far from Highway 401 with no easy access to it. And more than 80% of local municipal roads are tar and chip that are not suitable for heavy trucks or large traffic volumes. It's directly adjacent to sensitive primary groundwater recharge areas of the Waterloo Moraine and contains wellhead protection areas, creeks, and streams. How are we still going to meet our Paris Accord climate targets when all this development is so contrary to our regional policies and greenhouse gas reductions needed for our future sustainability? And why haven't any cost estimates for all the required infrastructure for this distant site be released? In conclusion, this bundled Wilmot Land Assembly fiasco is an embarrassment to our region. It needs to be stopped with proper, transparent public planning processes undertaken for a site that doesn't destroy our irreplaceable farmland and that is congruent with extensive previous planning, our regional official plan, and countryside line. Thousands of Fight for Farmland signs and tens of thousands of petition signatures show the widespread public opposition. We need a plan that everyone can support, not just the people who stand to profit the most from it. We simply must do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCabe, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks for coming in tonight, Kevin. I just want to double check that I heard you correctly in your comments, because what I think I heard was that you said something about the province forced land upon the region.
Yes.
Is that what you said? I'm not sure what you're referring to about the province forcing land on regional municipalities.
Yes, and what I'm referring to is back in April when Minister Steve Clark forced, instead of approving our regional official plan, as was approved almost unanimously by all the councillors and mayors in this council chamber, the province came back and instead of agreeing to the minimal farmland loss contained in our regional official plan, instead forced open thousands of acres of boundary expansions, these forced boundary expansions. Those forced boundary expansions were then later repealed in the Greenbelt fiasco, when Minister Steve Clark couldn't explain how any of those lands were chosen, just like they couldn't explain any of the Greenbelt scandal and how those lands were chosen, magically owned by those developers that's now being investigated by the RCMP. Although Minister Calandra then reinstated...
Kevin, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But you're saying the province forced this on municipalities. My understanding is that there was, these were not lands forced on anyone unless they were requested. So I'm just a bit worried about your language there.
Yeah. No,
is that, and how you're characterizing that?
Yeah. No, certainly. The initial Steve Clark boundary expansions, which we didn't even get a map of. The only way to get a map of was to go to the ministry office. We actually had to send a runner down to Bay Street to get the map of. That was forced with Steve Clark with no data, no justification, no rationale, no understanding of even the lands that were being forced open in the region.
Any further questions, Councillor McCabe?
Well, I'm just wondering if it's really fair to characterize it as the province forcing land open, because land had to be requested, was my understanding, not, it wasn't the province forcing this. It was only if local municipalities requested additional land to be added beyond what was, as you said, the regional official plan that had previously been approved. So I just want to make sure, the record's kind of straight on that.
Yeah.
If no one requested it, the land wouldn't have been added outside of the countryside line.
Under Steve Clark, no one had requested it, and it was our regional official plan that was overridden by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, much to the concern and dismay of the region. And then, as I mentioned, we later saw that become embroiled in the Greenbelt scandal. That was undone and then redone by Minister Calandra, who did ask local officials if they wanted those forced expansions re-enabled or not. And it came down to our individual councils here. Some of our councils and mayors brought it before their councils. Some did not. Some of those councils chose not. I looked at, for example, Wellesley, chose not to ask for those boundary expansions. Others of our municipalities did ask for those boundary expansions to be re-enabled.
But thank you, Councillor McCabe. It's a fair clarification, and Kevin's
and it's a
taken us
complicated
through
situation. It's been a
the
real
bouncing ball, right?
Yeah, it's been a real quagmire with the province, as so many issues have been with the province. So,
Councillor Salonen.
Thank you. I actually don't have any questions. Just wanted to say thank you, Kevin, for coming out, as I thank every Wilmot resident who takes the time to make it into Kitchener. So it was, as always, good to hear from you.
Thank you. There's a strong Wilmot showing here tonight.
Councillor Deutschman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Redmond. I was just going to confirm Kevin's version. It was Mr. Clark that forced the Greenland. It was Minister Calandra that came up with their own solution to end up with something that was the same result at the end of the day. So all the requests were made under Minister Calandra. Thank you.
Yeah, correct.
Councillor Shantz.
Hi, I just want to make a comment to all the delegations. I have been listening. I've had my camera off. Internet is very unstable, and often I go to turn it on and everything freezes on me. So I just wanted people to know that I have been here and listening.
It's always great. It's always great to see your face, Councillor Shantz. Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just clarification, make sure I'm hearing this. So there are municipalities who have since asked for more land to be added.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's correct. In contravention of what had been decided in the regional official plan by everyone. What we ended up with basically is a free-for-all amongst our municipalities, trying to get all the land they could, each and every one of them, while it was available from the province. Some of them claiming they had always wanted it and had always been denied by the region. In the past, the region had worked very carefully for modest growth and kind of took a pie and tried to divide it equally amongst everyone. What we saw instead was a free-for-all under Doug Ford, where the kids were fighting for everything they could get in the candy store.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin, for clarifying. I was like, did I just hear that correctly? So thanks again.
It's been a challenging time for regional planning.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for this intervention and all the work you do.
Thank you. Hopefully we can find the needed solutions in the months ahead.
Colleagues, that is the end of delegations. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of previous meetings under items 8.1 to 8.9 on the agenda. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Hunick, seconded by Councillor Harris. Please use your e-scribe to vote.
The 8.9 is included?
I'm not sure. Bill, what are we voting? The minutes. Okay. So that's the minutes. So to 8.9 is the minutes. Did you have a...
I want to speak to 8.9. Is that included in this?
Colleagues, that is carried. I think we're going to just pause for a moment while some of our guests leave the gallery. So, colleagues, I would draw your attention to the fact that you have received a package of communications electronically. And we'll move to motions to go into committee of the whole to consider reports. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Wolf, seconded by Councillor Nowak. Please use your e-scribe to vote. And we are voting that Council go into committee of the whole to consider reports. Colleagues, that is carried. The first report to be considered is Committee Report, Sustainability, Infrastructure and Development Committee, Summary, October the 8th. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Foxton, seconded by Councillor Wolf. Please use your e-scribe to vote.
Voting? 11.1.1. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Colleagues, that is carried. I will now entertain a motion to approve the summary as listed on the agenda for Administration and Finance Committee on October the 8th, 2024. If I could have a mover, moved by Councillor Bravanovich. Okay.
I'll second it.
Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Craig. Yep. Okay. Oh, Councillor Bravanovich, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to speak to item 11.1.2, item 1, and ask that we deal with that one separately. I will be voting against it as I did at committee, and in fact, since committee have heard from a number of people, and council has received similar correspondence as it was addressed to all of us from people who are concerned about the direction that we're going, particularly with the doubling of fines and so on, with the AMP system. Earlier today, we also heard from one of my colleagues on Kitchener City Council, the chair of our Finance and Corporate Services Committee, Scott Davey, who also wrote to Regional Council with his concerns around the implementation of this of the proposal that's before us. I think it's important to remember when council originally considered this, this was not the proposal that was in front of us. The doubling of fines is, I think, particularly putting a difficult onus on people. And yes, I know there are people around this horseshoe who will say, well, you know, if you don't speed, you're not going to get one. But I'd like to remind people that, you know, chances are probably at some point in most of our lives, people have at some point gotten a speeding ticket, but it was not a doubling of the speeding ticket that happened, and it certainly served as corrective behavior. I think we can't lose sight of the fact, and I remember Councillor Wolf spoke about this at committee. Councillor Davey raised it in his letter, and others did as well. If we think about it, often the people who are trying to rush around are some of those in our community who are dealing with the biggest financial challenges already. They're maybe running around to 3 or 4 different part-time jobs. You know, most of us around this horseshoe are quite fortunate in our circumstances and aren't having to deal with that. And to put that undue pressure is just not something I can support. Thank you.
So there's 2 motions within this grouping from Finance and Administration Committee from October the 8th. Councillor Bravanovich has asked that 1 be taken separately and then 2. I'm going to suggest that the second bullet point, which seems less controversial, be voted on. Councillor Deutschmann, do you want to speak to 1 or to 2?
I was going to speak to the one that Councillor Bravanovich was referring to, so I thought you were going to pass the bulk first, and then we could speak to the other one.
Okay, and Councillor Wolf, you as well? Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the second bullet. There's A, B, C, and D as part of that, so please cast your ballot, and then I'll go back to the speakers list.
Apologies, Madam Chair. I just got kicked out of my out of eScribe, so just if you could just give me a minute to get back in.
Sure.
But Madam Chair, it is number 1, 2, 3, 4. So 11.1.2, number 2 that you're voting on, correct? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I don't know what's on the screen.
So while Councillor McCabe gets hooked up again, Councillor Hunick, it is that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo approved the following outlined report dated August 13th, 2024. Adopt a 2-step community safety zone warrant. Direct staff to report back with a list of designated school zones. Should the school zone designation be passed? Adopt strategy of utilizing community safety zone designation for all schools along regional roadways that are equipped with municipal speed cameras in the future. And D, direct staff to use newly adopted community safety zone warrant to identify comprehensive list of prospective community safety zones along regional roads. You're welcome.
No. Anything that's amps is doubled.
That is carried, colleagues. So we now go back to the first section, which is the regional municipality take the following actions with respect to the implementation of a regional Waterloo administrative penalty program and report dated August 13th, 2024. And there are subsections A, B, and C, which is to enact the penalty program bylaw. B is to enact a hearing by officer bylaw as set out in Appendix B, and C is to approve the appointment and conduct of hearing officers policy. So, Councillor Deutschmann.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. Yeah, I support this. I acknowledge Councillor Urbanovich's comments because there were changes as this evolved over time, because the doubling of fines was something new. But That's because we're switching to an in-house program and we're required by the legislation to double the fine. So it's out of our hands in that case. And at the end of the day, I did see Councillor Davies' email, and I like Councillor Davie very much, but I have a bit of a difference in terms of what people say at the doorstep. They're saying reduce the speeding. They're not qualifying it by deaths or anything else. I mean, that's the ultimate goal of reducing the speeding, but they're saying reduce the speeding. And this is a way that we can reduce speeding in our community. And at the end of the day, I mean, I drive down Franklin between King and Ottawa, and you know, reducing the time, reducing the speed makes the ride eminently more enjoyable, because you can, you know, be aware of what's happening in your surroundings. It's safer everywhere. You can see the people walking on the sidewalks. It's just a pleasant ride. So, you know, it's a very simple solution to someone that is incurring tickets. Obviously, that's a problem, and that's something in their ability to resolve. And we're all trying to make our community safer. And I also want to point out that once this is implemented, there's nothing to stop the regional council to make changes. Just like, for example, the city of Waterloo had a citywide 30-kilometer speed limit, and after their election, changed a bunch of them to 40 and saved some parts to still be 30. So let's get it in there, let's get it done, let's get moving on it, and we can make tweaks and changes as we go forward. Thank you.
Councillor Deutschmann, I had no idea that you were so sanguine now that you've slowed your driving down. That's good to hear. Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Madam Chair. Well, I agree with Barry next door here. I think the fines, doubling them is overreach. We know that 1 in 8 families in the region experience food insecurity. Doubling a fine does make a big difference to many people. And the fact that we have a fine already slows people down. And we have lowered the speed limits to 40 and 30, depending on which city you're in front of the schools. So it's not that we're saying people should be speeding, and we are penalizing them. I am just saying that to double the fines is overreach. And we're also doing that 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. So at 3 a.m., if you're going 50 kilometers an hour past a school, that's a $150 ticket. And I think when people don't feel it's justified, that's when you find people start objecting. That's where you see people damaging cameras, that kind of thing. So I believe in safety. I also believe, as the Councillor for Kitchener pointed out, in looking at some facts, and the facts when they asked how many children had been hit by cars in front of schools, it was 0 in the last 6 years. And I think that where we need to concentrate, if we're really looking at safety for pedestrians and for children, is actually it's often at a four-way stop or cars turning right. And the accidents that may occur at schools, I was a teacher for many, many years, are often someone turning around or backing up. It's not speeders. So I think that we all like to say, oh, think of the children, think of the speeders, and have this vision in our head of someone going 80 miles an hour past a school and hitting a child. That's not what's happening. And I think we are frankly overreacting with doubling the fines and having them in this way 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So I'm going to acknowledge Councillor Hunick, and then I'm going to call the question. This has gotten lots of debate over a couple of years now. So Councillor Hunick, and then we'll call the vote.
Speeding is not a universal experience. I've never gotten a speeding ticket. Speeding is a 100% avoidable offense. And while I 100% want to get behind marginalized folks, I'm not for marginalized folks or anyone speeding. And I think that this policy offers sufficient grace in that if someone really can't pay and circumstantially had a reason for speeding, whatever that may be, we can actually cancel the fine or make it payable for them. So not supporting this doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm really excited for it to take effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunick. I will now call the question and just make the observation, while Councillor Hunick has never had a speeding ticket, she has run over me. Colleagues, that is carried. Thank you. The next agenda item is Community and Health Services Summary, October the 8th, 2024. And I would call on Peter Sweeney, Commissioner of Community Services, to provide an update on Herbs Road Hybrid Emergency Shelter.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. Yes, good evening, Regional Council. Just thought it would be helpful and appropriate to acknowledge, since the last time we met at committee when this recommendation came forward, and tonight that we held a community meeting of neighbors of Herbs Road on Tuesday, October 15th. There were about 40 folks in attendance of residents who live nearby. We also had two of our regional councillors, Councillor Erb and Councillor Salonen, joined us that evening, as well as our colleagues from the Working Centre, a couple of folks who are here tonight, and of course, regional staff. I just wanted to let Regional Council know that based on the work we've done over the last 2 weeks or so since we first discussed this with you, and specifically coming out of that meeting, that we will be committing to some operational changes based on that feedback, and we will be sharing those changes with that neighborhood group tomorrow, actually. And at a high level, we are committing to strengthening what we call our Good Neighbor policy, which will more clearly outline expectations of shelter participants as community members. We are committing to increase communication and community engagement with the surrounding community, and enhancing security efforts to response to community calls. I also want to acknowledge that a significant portion of the feedback that we received to inform the recommendation that we made at committee and that stands before you this evening came from the residents from Herbs Road itself, both current residents and former residents, and we are also, through our partners at the Social Development Centre, committed to sharing that feedback with those participants as well, so that they see and feel that their feedback has been heard and actioned on as well. So I just wanted to provide that update before you go into the next conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Erb.
Thank you. I'm prepared to move the recommendation, and I'd like to speak to it, so I'm not sure if you want to get a seconder on the floor first, or...
Councillor Erb is moving the recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hunick? Councillor Erb, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to speak in favor of these recommendations, and also speak because of comments made at committee on October the 8th, and in an article in the Waterloo Regional Record on October the 10th by my council colleague from Wilmot, Councillor Salonen. And I beg council's indulgence that my comments may take a bit longer than usual. However, I think a fulsome response is necessary. While I acknowledge that as members of council, we have every right and expectation from the public to express our opinion in debate around this horseshoe and through the media, I feel that when it is directed towards our professional staff who have worked so hard over many years to develop a very intentional strategy, and that has been supported by this and previous councils to address the issue of homelessness and housing, there is a responsibility of other members around this horseshoe to respond. And I want to continue to have good working relationships with all my council colleagues. However, particularly in this instance, and as chair of Community and Health Services Committee, I'm not prepared to sit back and have our staff feel they need to be looking over their shoulder because their work is not being valued or respected by council. In a spirit to hopefully maintain a respectful and collegial relationship going forward, I did give Councillor Solonen a heads up that I was going to speak on this issue tonight. I don't think it's helpful to say that this is not about staff or community partners, as the article suggested, and then spend the balance of the article saying that we need a radical change in policy decisions, that we're perpetuating a cycle of instability, that we celebrate those few who manage to escape homelessness despite our flawed system, that it is a critique of a system that claims to be housing first, that we should be bold and invest in real solutions, that we are focusing on outlier successes to justify a system that leaves many people behind, and other comments. And nor is it helpful to say that nearly 20% of residents from the shelter find housing is a failure, or suggesting investing dollars into the plan to end chronic homelessness is pouring money into a broken system. Our staff, who are admired by many other municipalities, not just in the province but across Canada, for their bold initiatives, do not deserve to feel that they are not doing their job with the best of intentions. Not only have these comments and article been discouraging to staff, but I can also tell you how disheartened our community partners have felt. They work tirelessly day after day after day to care and support some of the most vulnerable in our community, and my colleagues' comments were not helpful. Our community partners such as Indwell, Cambridge Shelter Corporation or Bridges, House of Friendship, One Roof, Ray of Hope, and others pour their heart and soul into trying to stabilize the lives of those dealing with mental health, addictions, and many other challenges. All these community partners and those in other municipalities are all successfully, and I use that word successfully, moving approximately 20% of their residents to more stable housing, which then opens up more room for another 20% to come into their facilities of people who are currently not housed. The comment of celebrating this percent of people is not helpful, but rather it is something to be celebrated by the individuals who move into more permanent housing, by their parents, their children, their siblings, their grandchildren, and their friends. And it is a celebration of a system that is changing lives and opportunities for families to nurture new relationships and enter and create a better life. So to be able to say that in just 18 months, we opened an entirely new concept in emergency shelter, we moved more than 100 people experiencing homelessness to that site, and managed to place 19 of them into permanent housing and another 40 current residents housing ready and waiting for an affordable housing, is indeed, in my mind, an overwhelming success. There's no question there's a cost to this. However, the cost of creating a space where those who have experienced chronic homelessness can be stabilized before moving on to permanent housing is essential to save money in the future. If my math is correct, given that there are 50 individuals living at Herbs Road and an annual cost of approximately $2.6 million, it costs $142 per day to keep one of these individuals housed and safe, or approximately $4,000 per month. And to answer this complexity of cost, we need to look at the realities of the cost to address homelessness. In a recent article in the Toronto Star, the work of Dr. Andrew Bozier was highlighted. He's the founding executive director of the Cattuso Centre for Social Medicine at the University Health Network in Toronto. He and his team's research stated that it costs over $30,000 a month to support someone in hospital, $11,000 a month to support someone in the prison system, $6,000 to $7,000 a month to support someone in the emergency shelter system, and roughly $4,000 a month in supportive housing, like Herbs Road. The House of Friendship and the Working Centre have reduced their incident calls by over 50% since operating their respective supportive housing sites, and that has significant impact on our emergency rooms, EMS, police, and other emergency services. Spending part of our budget to maintain the supportive housing offered at Herbs Road is a cost efficiency success, and I think that should end the discussion. And confirmed by other professionals like Dr. Rossi and our professional staff who understand the true complexities of dealing with homelessness. The suggestion that we are not adopting a housing first policy is just not accurate. The region of Waterloo is one of the first communities in Canada to adopt housing first. We've been doing it since 2014. It's a philosophy that moves people experiencing chronic homelessness from the street or emergency shelters into stable, long-term housing with supports and services that are needed. For a little lesson in our region's history, we were one of the early adopters of the housing first approach in Canada, implemented in 2014. And our early adoption positioned Waterloo region among the leading Canadian communities focusing on evidence-based solutions to homelessness as housing first gained momentum. Many regions across Canada have since followed suit, making it a central strategy in addressing homelessness. And proof of the housing first policy is in the financial investment we are making to house people. The region's housing and homeless operating budget is $99.5 million in 2024, combined with a capital budget of $94.7 million for an overall total of $194 million. In the operating budget, $70 million of the $99 million, or approximately 70% of that operating budget, is spent on funding permanent housing and initiatives like Waterloo Regional Housing and Building Better Futures. The remaining $29.5 million is spent on homelessness efforts. So with the $70 million from operating plus $94 million in capital.
Councillor Erb, I know you had cautioned us you're going to on a little longer. Are you close to summing up?
Yep.
Okay.
We're nearly 6 times, and I repeat, 6 times the amount in creating permanent housing than when we invest in targeting homelessness. So this notion that we are not investing enough in permanent solutions is just not accurate. I'm going to skip some of the other information then and deal with my last these comments here. There's plenty of conversation today in many different settings about power imbalances. And in this setting around these horseshoes, I think it's something we need to pay attention to. As councillors, on behalf of the people we represent, we have an obligation to ask questions, get clarification, and ask for more information. Excuse me, but it's how we ask those questions or seek clarification or interpret the work of staff that is so important. Staff can defend the content of the reports, but they cannot defend themselves when questions are asked surrounding the validity of what they are recommending. For those of us who have been involved in the private sector, I can never ever imagine critiquing a work colleague in front of a customer or a group of customers for the work they have done, and then expect that person to feel valued and want to remain in the workplace, or that the business survive in a long term. I do wish the comments of Councillor Sallin would have been directed towards the provincial and federal governments for not recognizing the crisis municipalities are facing with the growing number of homeless individuals and lack of affordable housing, which includes supports. To me, that's where the finger needs to be pointed. We have Building Better Futures, we have the plan to end chronic homelessness, and we have the staff who understand the issue and are more than capable to implement what it takes to solve the housing crisis. However, we can only do so much with the limited resources we have using property tax levy. And I think in the opinion of all my colleagues around this table, as we have often said, we need a new deal for municipalities so we can adequately care for those in our community who are in need of support. And I think this is something all of us, councillors and staff working together, would unanimously agree on. I apologize for taking so long.
Thank you, Councillor Erb. Councillor Salonen.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Councillor Erb, I can appreciate your thoughts and comments. The first thing I do need to address, by no means were my comments directed at staff. It was directed, frankly, at the 15 of my colleagues, including yourself, that sit around our horseshoe. And yes, going into an op-ed is something that is common, as well as it is to provide insight into what cannot be articulated in what generally we have 5 minutes to speak on around the horseshoe. And in terms of addressing the housing first approach, I know that the region says that they are housing first. However, even what you described as our system, not the definition of housing first that I'm referring to. Also, if you would like all of the sources that I had for my op-ed, I'm more than happy to pass those along to you, as I did have to provide them before the article was published. It is all backed by research and evidence. What I want to bring to council, and again, I'm by no means questioning or denying staff or any of our partners are working tirelessly day after day, as well as you were at the meeting on Herbs Road where I stood up and I told all of the residents in the room that they cannot attack our staff, and that it is a policy decision, and I did stand up for and do continue to stand up for our staff. In terms of me directing my comments at the provincial and federal level, I don't personally have control in those rooms. Yes, absolutely, I can advocate at the provincial and federal level, as all of us can, but the only thing I do have an impact on is my vote around this horseshoe, and of course my one at my local council. But on this matter, it's down to the 16 of us to do what's in our power to best use our resources. And I know you kept on referencing that it seems that you think that I'm looking from a fiscal perspective on this. I am, but also keep in mind that what I'm asking for is actually more expensive up front than the system that we're currently doing to make that shift into, instead of building more or supporting continuations of our shelter system, which is a system that, yes, we use like many others, but again, is not serving the mass majority in long-term positive outcomes. I'm saying we should be investing further into providing housing first, which means if you are homeless and experiencing homelessness, you can show up at the region or at one of our facilities. You will be provided a permanent residency, which Herbs Road is not a permanent or even a supportive housing. Herbs Road is recognized as part of our emergency shelter system, which is a part of the transitional housing system. And what I'm arguing is that instead of investing more into that, why don't we invest into making permanent houses for these individuals, or units? Apartments are far more effective, so that they don't have to wait. Like currently we have 40 residents who are waiting to be housed at the next step and no next step available for them. That is what my argument is in, and I'm more than happy to go further in depth with you. What I'm saying, this radical change, it really is not on staff to make. It is on us as policy makers to decide if that is asking our staff to investigate and to choose to do. I can appreciate that many colleagues around the table, that is not what they want to do or not what they see doing, and that's fine. But I also have to advocate for what I think is best, and a best approach for our community. The other thing I did want to acknowledge that there are other communities such as Toronto who are starting to invest in this. Toronto recently opened up Dunn House, which created, I believe it was 51 permanent units for chronically unhoused individuals, and some of the most acute cases. And in fact, it's actually directly connected to health services right on site. And those are permanent. Those individuals for the rest of their life never need to leave the space if they choose not to. And again, housing first also relies on no barrier to entry. And even Herbs Road has been acknowledged by staff that there is a low barrier to entry to get there. So we are still excluding people from being able to even access our system. And I'm advocating that we look at a different approach and that we that we put forward policy that then has staff enacting different actions. I completely acknowledge, recognize, and do appreciate the work that our staff continue to do in this space. And it is on direction of council. So really my article continues to be directed at all of my colleagues sitting around the horseshoe, and that we need to reflect on what kind of policy we want to be setting going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sallin. And Councillor Deutschmann.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. So I'm not getting into that crossfire.
Good news.
Yeah. My comment is aimed at Commissioner Sweeney, son of one of the most eloquent politicians I ever had the opportunity to meet. So Peter, just back to your comment earlier about the neighborhood policy, that's what caught my attention before the other stuff. And I just want to follow up on that, because as you know, that's the King Street shelter issue that we've been dealing with, and it is, I think, a perennial issue. I think the consumption treatment site, I'd submit, did an excellent job at dealing with the neighborhood outreach issues there because of the, how it fits so well within the community. So I just want to know, so my question would be do we have a general policy, and can we build on this policy so that we have a bit of a framework or a blueprint so that when we're looking to do other things in the community, that the issue of the neighborhood is very much top of mind and very much an important element of us and any operator that comes in to operate whatever facility we are operating. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Deutschmann. Yes, so the requirement to have, what I'm referring to as a good neighbor policy is in our contractual relationships with all of our operators. So it's incumbent upon the operators to have certain things in place with respect to engagement with our neighborhood. What we're also learning is the complexity of offering these services in certain communities and certain neighborhoods comes with new conversations that need to have. And again, you were at the meeting that you referenced at the King Street Shelter. There was some feedback there that required us to go back and look at some unique circumstances and adjust and adapt as we're going on. And I think what we experienced, I was at, obviously was spent the time at that meeting last week, came to the same conclusion that there were some updates based on some feedback that we were getting that we can look into it. So the short answer is yes, there's a policy framework and an expectation in all of our contracts with our operators. And what we're learning is along the way that we sometimes have to go back and revisit them after a period of time. And, again, consistently commit to ongoing feedback dialogue mechanisms with those residents and neighbors.
And just to follow up on that, because that is a consistent theme a bit in that the operator, and then we have to come back and then we do more. And I think it's incumbent on the region to make sure that we have the best practices in place, learning from these experiences and ensuring that the operator is living up to those standards, because it's so crucial for people in the neighborhood. And you know what's happening with King Street Shelter, and you just, my ears tweaked when you mentioned that there was something more coming from the meeting you had on Herb Street. So that made me recognize that yes, we have to continually do more and improve our practices in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Madam Chair, I just wanted to thank Councillor Erb for his thoughtful comments, and I appreciate him defending staff, our most vulnerable citizens, and our partner organizations. I think he clearly showed that Herb Street has been successful and continues to be, and how tirelessly our staff are working for solutions. And I think it needed to be said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shantz.
Thank you, and thank you for all the comments on this file. I've said a number of times that, and this is not a reflection on staff or the work that they're doing, but I've said a number of times that our problem isn't our emergency spaces. Our problem is the next step, and so I have trouble when we keep increasing emergency spaces. I think what we need is more permanent and affordable houses to move those folks into. And Councillor Erb said today, or maybe it was Mr. Sweeney, that there were 40 people waiting for affordable housing, and I think that was just out of the Erbs Road community. So if we've got 80% of our 600 emergency spaces with people, 80% of them that can go into permanent housing, we should be working on permanent housing. And I'm just going to keep sort of barking up that tree. That said, I am supportive of continuing the Erbs Road shelter because it is a unique shelter, and because it gives the folks there some privacy and some space where they can feel they have a safe space for their things and for themselves. So I will support this, but I really want to see us more towards permanent housing and less in spending money on emergency.
Thank you. Councillor Ravanovich.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Redmond, and thank you to all my colleagues for their comments on this issue. I didn't have an opportunity to speak at committee on this, and what I will say is, and even in talking with our partners who are involved in delivering these types of emergency or transitional services, I think everyone agrees that ultimately where we want to be is permanent housing and ideally even permanent buildings for residents who are in need of this kind of transitional housing. This is a population that, for a variety of challenges that they're dealing with in their lives, housing is first and foremost at the top of the list of what's needed to help ensure they get put onto a road of stability. What we do know, though, from the past, in the absence of those kinds of permanent facilities that I think I've heard both Councillor Salonen and Councillor Shantz talk about, I can say that things like a Better Tent City and now the Herb Street facility are certainly a much better alternative than sleeping in the rough. I'm seeing again people in our community who are sleeping on front lawns, who are sleeping in bus shelters, who are sleeping alongside buildings, and this is something that is not okay. It's not okay in our community. It's not okay in any community in Canada, certainly, and arguably anywhere on the planet. But what we can control is what's happening here. So this is an important and necessary step, and so I will support it. But I do believe that we do need to focus our energies together with our provincial and federal partners on more permanent solutions. I do know that we heard Minister Fraser talk about flowing money directly to municipalities in terms of emergency money for the shelter system, and looking to do that prior to prior to the winter, hopefully. I know this is something that's been talked about at FCM's Big City Mayors Caucus, and I know it's something that last Friday was talked about and at the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus, and both Mayors Liggett and McCabe were there as well. So I think we all need to recognize that we're continuing to see growing numbers of individuals who are impacted. And the solutions aren't easy, and we need to collectively work together as a council, as our staff, and as our community partners to tackle these issues. Thank you.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, Chair. When we did the plan to end chronic homelessness, I was excited. Did you remember all the agencies that sat in this room? And we talked, each of them wanted to be involved, and there were certain pillars that led the way to, this is just phase one. Phase one is making sure we get as many off the street as quickly as we can. Phase two is to move them through the system. Now, I understand what Mayor Shantz and Mayor Salonen is talking about. We want everybody to have a home, but not just a building to sleep in. We want a lifestyle. But first, we have to get the Mormons safe. And then as we get the Mormons safe and we deal with other issues that they have in possible mental illness or drugs or whatever, it is an evolving process. So no one's wrong here, and no one, Peter and staff, no one was out to jab the staff, I don't feel. I think that that Salonen and Shantz were seeing the future and hoping, maybe they're young, they're hoping for it today. And I'm old, and I know that nothing happens tomorrow. But I still see it. I still see that vision, and I think it's a perfect vision, the plan to end chronic homelessness and all the agencies that are involved. And let's get them off the street. Let's get them warm. Let's get them safe. Let's get them ready for the next stage. And we're in a housing crisis. There's not homes to put them in yet, but we're getting there. Let's hope to God we get there. And I still think that nobody's wrong, and I hope that staff didn't take offense at all to this. Natasha and Sandy have the vision of everybody being homed. And I hope to see it in my lifetime. But I'm getting old. I'm not sure it will. But you're doing an excellent job, in my opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Hunick.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Councillor Erb for speaking so eloquently on the subject and outlining the finances of it all. Finances are not more important than people, but they are important. And I'm not homeless, but it requires a lot more than $4,000 a month for me to live well. And so I'm just one example of a vulnerable person that relies on various supports. And so I want to put that out there. Next, Mr. Sweeney, I've heard you speak at various provincial and national conferences and been admired for the work that your team does by other municipalities across the country. And I appreciate, as Councillor Erb noted, that Waterloo region is leading the way in this regard. And in many regards, we are number one, which is really important to me. I wonder if you could speak to, are there other programs that you know of happening nationally or provincially perhaps that have more than a 20% success rate as Herb's Road does?
Through you, Chair. Councillor Hunick, thank you. I don't have any data handy that I could point to in terms of other communities and best practice. I can tell you the outcomes, the housing outcomes that we're seeing at Herb's Road in a period of 18 months are consistent with what we're seeing in other modalities across our housing stability system. And, you know, what we're consistently focusing on is is what was just, you know, recently referred to, is that there is an urgency to find as many possible ways as we can to get as many people as we can inside with supports and on that path to permanent housing, in some cases permanent housing with supports. And as we are building new affordable units across this community, as we are supporting financially and operationally supportive housing like we are seeing just down the street from here, which is a very similar model to the one referenced by Councillor Salonen in terms of the supporting housing. There we are building as fast as we can and also trying to do our best to get as many people inside as possible. And there is a transition period in our view that you have to do both. And so we're focusing on trying to address both ends of the spectrum as we can.
Thank you for that. And I just want to underscore what you have said, and Councillor Foxton and Chair Redmond have said on multiple occasions. It's not an either or. We can't do only permanent housing now and emergency shelter not. Right? It's a both and. And I'm thankful that our region is doing that very well.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillors Liggett and Craig, and then I'm going to call the questions. So, Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, let me say that Mr. Sweeney knows how I feel about him and the work that he does. The utmost confidence and respect that I have. I'm going to vote the same way tonight as I voted last time. But what I find extremely disturbing is what's occurred here around this horseshoe. Mayor Solomon, as Mayor Solomon, wrote the op-ed. She didn't write it as a member of council. She was writing it as the mayor of her community, which she had every right to do. She has explained here that she was not taking any attacks at any staff people. She doesn't do that. And I think that what's happened here tonight was not good for us as a whole, as council, for her being named and attacked around this horseshoe is something that I have never heard before. And I'm hoping that it doesn't happen again. I'm 100% behind any councillor who wants to speak their mind when they do it respectfully. I don't find that that was respectful when she was named repeatedly and her opinion was canceled by those comments. I understand where they came from, the root of them, but that's not acceptable.
Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. You know, the whole debate tonight is really an example of us at times turning in on ourselves because we don't have the resources financially or legislatively to do the things we want to do. And we end up attacking to some extent, or being perceived as attacking policies that we've put in place. I happen to agree with Councillor Solomon and Shantz about their attitude, about what they're concerned about, and I share a lot of that. But, you know, we look at the finances of the regional municipality and our ability to do things is continually restricted because of the lack of proper funding in the model that we exist in. And so we end up in this kind of recrimination within council. Everyone has a right to speak. Everyone has a right to an opinion. We're not always popular, but we're not elected to be popular. We're elected to say and do what we think is right. And I think that's the crux for me in terms of this whole argument. You know, and when you have a provincial government that's more caught up in beer stores and $200 gifts to community members before an election, and that kind of, or building tunnels under the 401, totally removed from the reality of what's going on in terms of municipalities. And here we are trying to do our best and having people approach us about a budget at 12%. Can we get it down to inflation? Well, of course we can't. And that's part of the issue that we're dealing with. And again, it comes back to resources. So I think we have to be careful. I think we have to be understanding. I don't think anybody here really attacks staff or ever even attends to. It just, you know, it comes out in the arguments that perhaps it's being perceived that way. So I think we have to be careful about that. But anyways, we are, I think, a municipal government that really is having difficulties living up to the ambitions of our community because of a lack of resources. And like I said, we end up turning in on ourselves. And I'd like to see a lot less of that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So, colleagues, this has had a thorough airing, and I'm going to call the question. So please use your e-scribe to vote. And this is on the extension in the investment in Herbs Road. Colleagues, that is carried. We will now vote to approve the summary listed on the agenda of Strategic Planning and Budget Committee meeting on October the 16th, 2024. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Wolf, seconded by Councillor James. Please use your e-scribe to vote. So colleagues, that is carried. The next is a closed summary of today's date. Looking for a mover and a seconder. Colleen James, Councillor James, sorry, and Councillor Foxton. Does anybody need it read out? This is what we dealt with in closed. This is a purchase of land on Eagle Street. Colleagues, that is carried. The next item is Board of Health, a Board of Health update. So welcome Dr. Wong, Commissioner of Public Health and Paramedic Services, Medical Officer of Health. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Redmond, Council. So tonight I just have a brief update. Public Health continues to support our health system partners as we begin to see an expected increase in respiratory virus activity in long-term care homes, retirement homes, and other congregate living settings. Flu and COVID-19 vaccines are currently available for high-risk persons through pharmacies and community healthcare providers. And starting next week, on Monday, October 28th, both vaccines will be available to the general public. Public Health will continue to offer vaccines for those who cannot be easily accommodated through pharmacies and community healthcare providers through our clinics at 20 Weber Street in Kitchener and 150 Main in Cambridge, as well as through our mobile vaccination bus. And finally, the province has now made RSV protection available for 3 specific groups: infants, pregnant women, and high-risk adults over the age of 60. So newborns will now be offered RSV immunizing agents at birth in hospital. Infants born in 2024, before the respiratory virus season began, and children up to 2 years of age with high-risk conditions will be offered RSV protection by their primary care provider, or can contact Public Health if they are not attached to a primary care provider. And finally, pregnant persons between 32 and 36 weeks and high-risk seniors over the age of 60 can also receive the RSV vaccine from their primary care provider. That's it, and Public Health will continue to keep you updated as the season progresses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no questions. Oh, Councillor Deutschmann.
Sorry, I'm getting a little tired, so I apologize. RIDS just recently, did you comment on that? I'm sorry, about the recent, I just wanted to ask, so there was recently the alert about the 5 deaths over 10 days. And as I read that information, it talked about how the drugs were tested at the CTS, I believe. So when we lose the CTS, how are we going to be able to replace that?
Partners are looking into how we might be able to continue drug checking. Right now, the ability to do the drug checking is tied to doing it at the CTS. That's part of the permission from the federal government. So we're looking at options for alternative funding from the federal government, for example. So, you know, it is a service that is valued by partners and clients. And of course, as you mentioned, it does help inform our community drug alerts. So it's something, you know, partners and ourselves are continuing to examine or explore ways to keep the funding for it going.
I see no further questions. Thank you very much. The next agenda item under matters of Committee of the Whole is appointment to the Sunnyside Foundation Board of Rachel Zhang for a term from now to expire September 2027. And it's dated October 23rd, 2024. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Wolf, seconded by Councillor Erb. Please use your e-scribe to vote. Thank you. That is carried. I'll next consider a motion for the Committee of the Whole to rise and Council to resume. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Hunick, seconded by Councillor Leggett. Please use your e-scribe to vote. Colleagues, that is carried. Next, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the proceedings of the Committee of the Whole. Moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by, how about Councillor Harris? Do you want to second that? Okay. Please use your e-scribe to vote. Thank you, Councillor Foxton. Often yours is the only hand up. Colleagues, that is carried. We have no motions, notices of motion, no unfinished business. We do, however, have a deferred motion from council meeting September 25th. And it is a deferred motion by Councillor Deutschmann and seconded by Councillor Salonen. The motion directs staff to provide further information on a report from the Land Assembly due diligence impacts. In closed session tonight, Council received the requested information regarding the ongoing confidentiality requirements related to the Land Assembly, along with the information requested in the deferred motion, and why It cannot be shared publicly. Based on the information we have received, I believe it would be appropriate for council to agree to have the motion withdrawn at this time. Are there any objections to withdrawing the motion?
Is that like a general thing? And if one voice said no, so you're asking me if I'm going to withdraw. Is that it, or just clarifying?
I'm asking if anybody has an objection to it being withdrawn.
Yeah, okay. Can I just comment for a second? Yeah.
Go ahead, Councillor Deutschmann.
Yeah, so as you just read, and I wasn't sure how it was going to be dealt with, so I appreciate what you just read. So it explains to the people that are here this evening that there's an opinion that this is information that's still subject to the confidentiality agreements that the region is under. So based on that advice, I'll be withdrawing this motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Salonen is a seconder. Do you want to make a comment?
No, that's fine. I was just waiting for Deutschmann's move, so I'm happy with it being withdrawn.
Thank you very much. So, is there any other business?
I guess I do have one point of order on that. If my understanding was correct at the last meeting, though, the report that we received was deferred from council actually accepting it because of the motion. So I'm just wondering what happens with the report that was brought forward, or if because it was for information it didn't need to be formally passed. I want to understand.
It was received for information according to the clerks, Councillor Salonen, and because the answers that were outstanding in the motion were dealt with and closed, it's considered dealt with. Okay.
Thank you for clarity.
You're welcome. Councillor Ravanovich.
Thank you very much. And I do have some questions for Mr. Sweeney about our shelters for this coming winter. And I did just let him know that I would be asking these. Obviously, winter's upon us very, very quickly. We know that the needs in our shelter system continue to be high. I believe this week, if not this week, next week, we're doing a point-in-time count, which will also give us a better idea in terms of what the challenges are that are being faced in terms of the shelter system. But I'm cognizant of the fact that there's a few realities happening. I believe the shelter on King Street at this point in time is slated to close at the end of March. I'm trying to remember what the date is for the shelter on Charles Street in terms of its future. And the one in next to Cameron Heights Pool. And then also we obviously have the Frederick Street building that's going to have some work done on it. And when it's slated to be ready, but that is sort of a cross section of the residents in the other two buildings. So I'm wondering if we can, because I think it's important that the public is aware of all this, wondering if we can get an update on those.
Certainly.
Mr. Sweeney, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you. Through you, Chair Redmond. Councillor Benovic, thank you for the questions. We actually have a communication to Council coming in the next few days that will outline the winter warming and surge plans for this winter, but happy to address some of the key elements of that now. Yes, as we all know, the weather in this community, in this country, turns at about the same time every year. We have an existing winter warming and surge capacity protocol and policy and practice in place that we implement every time, usually in November, and then moving through the winter, and then also responding as we need to. In addition, so that would generally involve where we can, additional motel spaces both in Kitchener and Cambridge, provisions for our existing shelter operators to, where possible, add beds on specific days and evenings where they can, and the ability for those operators to know that they have the resources at hand, that we have the resources at hand for them to be able to do that for short bursts without getting sort of pre-approval on that. We do have expanded spaces for youth coming on board. We're expecting the new shelter for women in Cambridge to come on board in December. And then we're also looking at some additional ideas around warming centers. So our warming center protocol will also kick in, I believe, on November the 1st, which will provide 7-day-a-week access to warming centers in Kitchener, Waterloo, and also in Cambridge. And then specifically to your questions around the existing shelter capacity challenges that we have, yes, the King Street shelter is scheduled to close at the end of March. 84 Frederick, we are hoping that the community space could be available as soon as December for any extreme weather and winter warming needs that it might accommodate. The shelter that is currently operating at the former Edith McIntosh Child Care Center will stay in place throughout this winter. And all that said, like we do at every stage of this work, and particularly as the weather becomes more challenging, I remain always concerned about the number of people falling into homelessness, both chronically and episodically in this community. And, it will continue to be a challenge to find the resources and supports for everyone, but we are doing our best. And again, there'll be some more information coming out to council in a matter of days, which will also be communicated as widely as possible to the community.
Okay, so just I guess on the King Street shelter, so right now when I look at the September numbers, most of our emergency shelter facilities are operating at 100%. Cambridge, I think, was operating at 85% from what I look at, and then we have our transitional facilities, and they're pretty full too. The only and on the emergency ones, the only exception really is one roof. On the King Street shelter, when you say that it's ending at the end of March, so it has 100 beds now. So is in the intent that it will run at full capacity until the end of March? And what's the plan if we don't have a backup at that point in time?
So we're in conversations with our colleagues at the Working Center. Jay and Joe are here this evening about the wind up plans for the King Street shelter. Obviously, we want to make sure that if there's a bed available, it can be used, and we also have to acknowledge that there are folks who have been staying at the King Street shelter for some period of time, and we're going to have to find ways to wind down in a way that we do not experience a dramatic impact on the 1st of April with 100 people without a place to stay that night. So it's our goal to do that as responsibly as we can and as human-centered as we can. There is currently, and the last I spoke with our colleagues at the Working Center, I believe of the 100 people, approximately 70 were women. And so we are planning to open up, as everybody knows, a women's shelter at 84 Frederick. So the plan would be to decant as many as possible there as needed, but also really working within the system to find opportunities for folks who are currently staying in shelters to access permanent housing where we can. And so the investments that we've made in rent supplements and other efforts to support people who are currently in shelter, out of shelter, and hopefully provide the spaces for the people that are currently experiencing homelessness. And as you've referenced, we're certainly aware of folks that are currently living rough, and it's going to continue to be a challenge to be able to provide the services for everybody with the resources that we have. You referenced the pit count. The point in time count actually occurred this week. So we will have updated numbers on what we're facing in this community. We'll be able to give you bring back a preliminary review of the pit count at our December committee meeting, and then a more fulsome analysis in terms of disaggregating some of that data in the new year.
Okay, and just on the ship one then, what is the tentative close date on that one? The end of March as well?
I'm sorry, Councillor Vandermeer, which one are you referring to?
The ship one on Charles Street.
At Edith Mack?
Yeah.
We don't have a closing date for that one currently, sir.
Okay. I guess the only thing I would say is whenever these, you talked about wind down and decanting, and I get all that, and we're obviously going to have some people moving over to the Frederick Street one, as you indicated, and there's 70 there, but that will still potentially leave 30 men plus all of the excess capacity that's there, plus the 30 that are at ship, depending on its timing. I guess I just want to identify now that my hope and my expectation from whatever plan comes forward to this council will actually ensure that there's a seamless transition from one type of temporary or transitional or permanent housing to another. In other words, we can't be in a world where on March 30th, King Street closes and 30 people are on the street, as an example. Like that's not an option in my mind. And I would hope that that's something that my colleagues share as well. And in the wind down of that, I'm also hoping that that doesn't mean that starting in, not unlike what we did in University Avenue ahead of the renovations, until we have a place for those folks at King Street. I'm hoping that we're not in a world where, come February or March, and winter can still be pretty bad, we're wound down and therefore not using the beds or using the space that's available. So I just want to flag that early on while we have time to prepare and plan accordingly for that.
Okay, next speaker is Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair. This question is for Acting Commissioner Spooner. It's regarding the recent legislation that was tabled by the province, that Bill 212 regarding the bike lanes. I know it's just tabled at this point, but is there anything you can comment on regional roads, and as this unfolds, hopefully get some feedback or some information back, but is there anything you can comment on, since this is kind of top of mind for many?
Yeah, through you, Chair, and thank you for the question. So as you rightly noted, we're working on best available information at this point. The documents became available Monday, so I'll give you my team's current interpretation. So the bill applies to bicycle lanes that are created by converting existing traffic lanes, and for this purpose, a bicycle lane includes any portion of a highway or roadway which is wholly or partially restricted or dedicated to bicycles. So that it introduces a process with two key parts. One that looks at new lanes in which we will need to seek ministerial approval for the implementation if there is a removal of a traffic lane. And the ministry will require some information around that that does not unduly diminish the orderly movement of motor vehicle traffic. There's a few exemptions in there about which stage of the project we're in. If we're quite advanced in it, there are some exemptions. The next is about existing lanes, and the ministry may require us to provide information relating to existing cycling facilities. I think it's important to remember that we pursue cycling as an option for residents for a few reasons. The first is our Growing with Care strategic plan has an equitable service and opportunities pillar. Freedom of movement, freedom of travel, and mode choice are critical in that strategy because 30 to 40% of our residents do not drive. Auto Trader also recently released some information that tells us that a new car in Canada costs $66,000, and the average cost of a used car in Canada is $33,000. So Regional staff has historically and will continue in future to be very clear on the overall corridor impacts for all modes when implementing changes to the network. We don't implement projects that unduly diminish the movement of anybody. And movement of all modes is critical to our network for both people and goods. Transportation in our region supports our people, our economy, and our way of life. In terms of our current plans, we have 240 kilometers of bike lanes in the region, and a very small part of that was constructed by removing traffic lanes, so this hasn't been our approach. Through the past 5 years, which would be the review period, we've implemented approximately 27 kilometers of bike lanes, and we currently believe that this legislation, if or when passed, could impact the following corridors that are in our plan. Victoria Street, Lancaster Street, King Street, Bridgeport Road, Herb Street, Westmount Road, and the Benton-Frederick corridor. So next steps on this one, we'll continue to work with our partners at the MTO as we always do. We'll understand the new process and requirements. And then once the process is developed, we'll obviously participate and we'll continue to present our very measured approach to providing options for our residents. Again, as we always do, reporting on the impacts to all modes as we make interventions and changes to the network.
Okay, thank you. And just one follow-up, just in terms of this and in communication and speaking with local area municipalities and their active transportation, that's ongoing as well, or will be part of just thinking of our active transportation trails, things that may intersect.
Yeah, through you, Chair, and thank you again. There's a few activities that'll go on. We've spoken about this across the municipalities with some of the transportation commissioners. Our Active Transportation Advisory Committee will have an all municipal meeting in the coming month, where I'm sure this will be a hot topic. So we'll be able to use our advisory committees as well. And then obviously, yes, when I refer to the cycling network, it is a network, much like our road network. Regardless of road authority or in this case bike lane authority, they need to connect. They need to be comprehensive. So that work will be ongoing with our area municipal partners.
Thank you. Please keep us updated.
Thank you. Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you. Actually, two matters. I'll talk about the first one first, and it's a follow-up to Councillor Urbanovich's comments about King Street. I can say unequivocally, my expectation is that King Street is closed effective March 31st, 2025, regardless of what is happening at that point. And I think the community has that expectation as well. It's been 2 years. It was supposed to close in June. They were told now it was going to be extended to March 31st, 2025. Any suggestion that it's going to go beyond that? Can't stand. And I'll bring forward a motion to that effect to deal with this issue. We need to confirm for the people in the community that it's closing March 31st, 2025, as they've been promised in several meetings. And we can't have any equivocation about that. And I would, there's lots of time now, and I'm hoping then that we will be getting regular updates starting in the new year, each month, to advise us as councillors what's happening with respect to that. Okay, thank you. Second point, I just want to draw to the attention of my fellow council members' correspondence, 9.2 and 9.3. 9.2 is a letter that I had sent to Chair McLean at the Waterloo Regional Police Service Board, asking for an update on their human resources data. This is information that the Police Services Board has provided quarterly every year, and this year decided not to provide this quarterly information and have left it to information that we won't be able to receive until the first quarter of 2025 for 2024. The relevance of that information is we're going to be asked to add 18 more officers to their contingent, their authorized limit. And as has been the experience in every year for the past 3 at minimum, they have not been able to hire to their contingent. I'm not talking about gapping. I'm talking about hiring. And I will be following up on this issue. I will be appearing at the Police Services Board to request this information personally, as I did previously. I thought it was fair that if I'm asking for it, I should go there and ask for it in person. And I will be bringing it forward to council in the form of a motion. If we're going to make informed decisions about our budget, and the police service budget is a significant portion of that, and looking at the cuts that we're considering to try to get us even down to 8%, We have to have this information in order to make an informed decision on behalf of the taxpayers of the region of Waterloo. And so I just direct those two pieces of correspondence to my fellow councillors. The response from Waterloo Regional Police Services is that they would not be providing the updated information that they have always provided every year by quarter, and now they're not anymore. And in the spirit of transparency, I have asked for that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Urban.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I wanted to follow up on Councillor Sweeney and or Commissioner Sweeney and Councillor Urbanovic's comments. I do know that staff have been working on finding additional spaces based on some of the changes that are going to be happening. And remind all of us in various municipalities and anybody in the community, staff are knocking on doors and not getting any answers and willing partners. And so municipalities, community people, please step up to the table because there's a need for space, but it's not for a lack of trying that they're not able to come up with the locations.
Thank you. Colleagues, I am now going to move and entertain a motion to enact bylaws first, second, and third reading. It's 20.1 through to 20.4. If I could have a mover. Moved by Councillor Wolf, seconded by Councillor James. Please use your e-scribe to vote. So we're enacting those bylaws. Colleagues, that is carried. And there are still some items that remain for council to discuss and close. None of the remaining items have anything that needs to be improved in open session. So I will now call on a motion to go into closed session following the adjournment of the open session to discuss the remaining items in closed. And it will be to receive advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege related to a proposed purchase of property in Wilmot Township, receiving advice on a subject that is subject to solicitor-client privilege related to a challenge to regional bylaw, and receiving advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege related to ongoing litigation before the Ontario Land Tribunal. Moved by Councillor Wolf, seconded by Councillor Nowak. Please use your e-scribe to vote. We have one more vote, colleagues. Colleagues, moving into closed, resuming is moved. Could I now have a mover and a seconder to adjourn? I see everybody. Councillor Williams, Councillor Deutschmann, please use your e-scribe to vote.